They're expanded. Now, as much as you or I may love Obama for who he is and what he represents, the sad fact is 2 million people in Pakistan are refugees today who were not refugees when Obama came to office. The sad fact is billions of dollars have been allocated in loan guarantees for the nuclear power industry. So for the first time in 30 years, a nuclear power plant will be built in the United States. A shameful act, one that contradicts the deliberation, the discussion, the nonviolent direct action of the anti-nuclear power movement that stopped nuclear power plants from continuing to be built. Here in New England, the Clamshell Alliance had a great effect on Seabrook and demanded various safety measures. So Obama's administration, as much as we might love him for what he represents, is not, to me, a form of democracy. It's a different kind of representation that only further perpetuates the rule of corporations. Where then do I see democracy? How can I be optimistic about this? Well, let's start, for instance, with the civil rights movement and the Montgomery bus boycott. People met as a beloved community and decided to participate as a group in a boycott of the bus system. It was very difficult. It was not that everyone had a car. Very few people had cars. Many people had to give up their jobs, had to make tremendous sacrifices, face great dangers, even death. And yet they deliberated as a community to make that happen. And they did it. They won their struggle. And today, all over the world, people respect that struggle and have been inspired by it. Let's look at the Black Panther Party. Mm-hmm. Normally, the media has made the Black Panther Party into some form of violent extremists. But when we look at what did the Black Panther Party do, what was the essence of this group? They fed children breakfast. Thousands of children who were going hungry were fed daily breakfasts. As former drug addicts, pimps, prostitutes changed their ways and got up early in the morning, got churches to open their basements and fed hungry children. They had free clothing programs, free medical clinics. They were the first group to speak publicly about sickle cell anemia and the health hazards that it posed. They created busing programs to help families whose loved ones were incarcerated in distant places to be able to visit them. Their so-called survival programs were an enormous asset in meeting people's direct needs. Their form of direct democracy, as they love to say, how do you fight racism? You don't fight racism through hatred. You fight racism through love, through solidarity, through an action of the heart. And they formed tremendous alliances with people whose skin color might be different than theirs, but whose thinking and hearts were in the same place. The Black Panther Party created what was known as the Rainbow Coalition. The first Rainbow Coalition was created among street gangs in Chicago by Fred Hampton, who was brutally murdered by the Chicago police and FBI on December 4th, 1969. Fred Hampton's example, however, continued. Today, Fred Hampton Jr. is an activist in his own right, following in his father's footsteps. But so many of us continued and were inspired by Fred Hampton's example. So the Black Panther Party organized a Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention, which has been conveniently omitted from most accounts of U.S. history. Yet the simple fact is, 15,000 Americans gathered in Philadelphia in September 1971 to write a new constitution for the United States.
Remarkable.
It was a truly remarkable event, particularly because there were so many different constituencies that were represented and who worked together, staying up all night to draft statements. I mean, the draft program of this document of a new constitution contains such eloquent statements as the people of the world have the right to the fruits of their labor. Very simple truth, and yet one that is somehow lost in what American government calls democracy. The Black Panther Party's Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention was unable to actualize a new constitution, but the spirit of direct democracy continued in the protest movements that grew out of it. And very interestingly, these movements of the 1960s culminated in the United States in 1970. Between May and August of 1970, there was a situation that we could call pre-revolutionary in the United States. You may remember, May 4th, 1970, 4 students were killed at Kent State. 10 days later, 2 students were killed at Jackson State University, all of whom had been protesting Nixon's expansion of the war into Cambodia. The protests that ensued from those murders meant that 4.5 million students and 500,000 faculty went on strike against the war in Vietnam, against the repression of the Black Panther Party, not for lower tuition or higher wages, but for real human concerns. That is a form of democracy, saying, stop this war. We will not continue with this war. So from there, we see the Chicano moratorium, August 29th in Los Angeles, where several people were killed, including journalist Ruben Salazar, who was there covering it as a reporter. We see the Women's Strike for Peace in the same period, where the symbol of feminism was born. Vietnam veterans mobilizing against the war. And we see the gay liberation movement beginning in the same period. So this period culminates in the Black Panther Party's Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention in September 1970, where Native Americans, Palestinians, gay people, feminist groups, student groups, counterculture. I mean, my memory, as I was there, my memory still, I see Muhammad Ali coming and shaking hands with people, not as a celebrity, as a participant, as someone who picked up on the energy of that gathering. The Philadelphia police had arrested dozens of Panthers before they had paraded them through the streets naked. They stopped dozens of buses trying to make their way into Philadelphia, full of people to attend. Nonetheless, 15,000 of us made it there. The black community opened up its arms, embraced us, let us sleep in their houses, in their churches, fed us, gave us spiritual guidance. And it was a wonderful, very moving event, an event based on love. And yet, what do they say today about the Black Panther Party? It was a violent group of extremists at a time when the United States government was murdering millions of Vietnamese people and Asian people were being dehumanized. At a time when the race tensions were so high, the Black Panther Party brought people together as an act of love. Yet our accounts of history somehow conveniently omit this simple kind of democracy, based on people's love for each other, their solidarity with each other, across national boundaries.
Which brings me now to another central insight of yours, through which one could reread all the major books that you've written, namely this exciting construct that you call the Eros effect. Just thinking about the combination of Eros and effect itself is so tantalizing. And yet, as I was doing research for the program, I noticed that it is the organizing principle of all your work. The Eros effect, you seem to think, is precisely what spills over people's activities as they, in their own way, attempt to live democracy. How about if we spend some time introducing very calmly, as you do, characteristically calm, what the Eros effect is to the viewers. And then we're going to take that one step further and try to relocate it in your relationship with